Hi there, I'm Oisín Lunny, welcoming you to the Siemens Advanta podcast, where we invite you to unlock the full potential of IoT. Every episode, we chat with some world-leading experts who can make the vision of an optimistic IoT-powered future a reality. And today, we're going to be exploring how to drive digital transformation and open innovation with a strong ecosystem. There's an old saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. But what about if you want to go fast and far? Well, then you need an ecosystem. But which ecosystem approach is right? How can you operationalize cooperation and ensure that everyone wins from the collaboration? To answer the big questions, I am thrilled to welcome back to the podcast the original podcast dynamic duo of Siemens Advanta CEO Aymeric Sarrazin. Welcome, Aymeric.
Hi, Oisín. Very good to be here.
Awesome. Welcome back. And joining him is Siemens Chief Technology and Strategy Officer, Peter Körte. Welcome back, Peter.
Well, thank you. It's great being back.
Phenomenal. We did get the band back together, and it's a good thing too, because we have a lot of opportunities to unpack here right now. So Peter, I'm going to start with your good self. You've been at the centre of Siemens' path to digital transformation. Can you tell us a bit about how Siemens started its journey in the world of IoT for its industry and infrastructure applications?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me start actually with a fun fact. So we talk a lot about IoT. If you had to date back when this actually really started, it was, I believe, in 1990. And there was a guy called John Romke, and he developed a toaster that could be turned on and off over the internet. So what he did is he actually wired his toaster to the computer because there was no Wi-Fi at the time. And so then he could, of course, start his toaster. That's exactly what IoT is. So an IoT is a combination of the two words of IT, information technology, and OT, operation technology. So IT is the computer, OT is the toaster. And that idea we've taken with us all along. So as Siemens, we've been approaching it from both ends. We are coming from the OT side. So we have a lot of devices, many of these devices over the years, so we could connect them like trains, like building automation systems, like factory automation systems. But we are also coming from the IT side. In other words, we were heavily investing since 2006. We spent more than 12 billion in acquisition on IT companies, software companies, right? And they are in the space of design, and they started in design. But, the nice thing is although IT and OT were really separate worlds, they're converging. That's the key word. And so what we see now over the many years, these two worlds interact now. Why? Because the more data you can actually access on the OT side, the more you put them into the IT world. And the IT world is coming the other way around. So we started with design, and then we actually got more into the production, and then we got into the machine in and itself of designing it and running it. And so all of a sudden, these two worlds are converging. And this is a fascinating development. We've seen that for ourselves. We've done that to our factories, to our buildings, but we also, of course, do this a lot together with our customers. But there's one thing that I want to mention is for that to work, you need to be open. And since this is about open innovation, it is also about open standards, about open technologies, about open APIs, in other words, interfaces, so that these things can seamlessly work together. And that is, of course, still today a big issue. By the way, we just launched a platform called the Siemens Accelerator. And this is exactly what we're trying to do, is providing open software, open hardware that you can easily connect, pretty much like all the devices we know from the consumer world, plug and play. And we know that's still a dream, and that dream we're still following.
Fantastic. Dare to dream, as they say. And my goodness, I was today years old when I learned that IoT actually stands for the Internet of Toasters. Well, thank you very much for putting me right on that. Okay, coming over to yourself, Aymeric. Now, Siemens has constantly worked with its customers, its partners, and many other collaborators for transformative solutions. To what extent has an open innovation ecosystem really enabled this incredibly creative growth?
You have to be now, as we're developing, and Peter, I like a lot the story from the toaster to accelerator, which is an amazing journey from one to the other. What is constant into this, and what Siemens brought again and again, is really combining the real world to the digital world. This is what also IoT is as well. So that strategy and IoT are very well together. As you do this, you need to have a lot of different players that need to work together to make that happen really. When you have the toaster and the line, okay, this is one-to-one, it's easier. When you start to have millions and millions and billions of connected devices, then suddenly the complexity is so high that you need to do that together. So 4 years ago, Siemens Advanta was created, and it was created to actually bring that ecosystem together, being part of an ecosystem where you have products, you have softwares, and you have these professional services that allow it to put together and to play those systems together. So the importance is not only good for business, good for society, but it's actually necessary. If we want to go forward and if we want to get more and more value from all these things combining, we must have and feel comfortable, and I'm sure we'll get to that a little bit later, about evolving and developing innovation in the ecosystem. And, this is easy to say, to actually enable it, to make it real, and to say, I am actually really part of the ecosystem. This is a great challenge.
Indeed. So you're not only talking the talk, you're walking the walk. And by the way, happy 4th anniversary to Siemens Advanta. It's an incredibly impressive first 4 years on the planet. And I expect we're going to see a lot more from this wonderful, innovative new company. We do live in a time of rapid and profound digital transformation all over the world. We're already globalized, we're already digitized. An enormous amount of data is generated every day. So why do companies need to adopt or even switch the innovation methods?
The very easy answer to this is because there's not a single company that can do it alone. The complexity of the challenges that we have around us, if you just take the whole discussion about global warming and decarbonization, if you just take that, and if you take your phone for an example, and if you say, if you wanted to know how much CO2 emissions your phone would be creating, it's a single number, right? But in order to get to this number, you need to get through the entire value chain. So you need to look at, of course, who's the glass manufacturer, who's the chip manufacturer, who's the casing. So you have to work with many, 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 many different participants from many different machines, tools, installed software. So all of that needs to be put together. If you think that there's the one guy in the middle that actually can orchestrate that, this is not going to happen. So that's why, going back to the conversation about being open and why we also have Advanta, is because you really need to sit down with the client and have the discussion about, okay, now what do you really need? Which systems do you need? Who are the suppliers that you need to bring in order to make this work? And these ecosystems, as you create them, they might vary every time depending on the purpose. In the case of CO2 emissions, we created something that is called C-Green. It's a software that you can use to define your product carbon footprint. But then you need an ecosystem where we created an association called Estanium, and many are joining in order to make this available. But again, not a single company can do this. And so very often, sometimes you are an orchestrator, sometimes you are a data provider, sometimes you're a recipient of that. It really depends on the purpose of what that does. But all along, you have to connect different companies. And this is exactly also where Advanta helps us a lot. But Aymeric, I'm sure you have a view on this too.
The speed of change is increasing tremendously, and going from a complicated world that is linear to a complex world where we'll have to all understand how change goes. This is exactly why an ecosystem is necessary. We see clients that are changing their business model, and they need to have an innovation that is actually taking into account all the things that's happening at the same time in order to change their strategy and their business model.
Yeah, indeed. And for anybody listening, do please check out that previous edition of the Siemens Advanta podcast, which explores a journey from a world that's complicated to complex and the kind of technology you need to have on your side to make sense of it all. And speaking of which, in previous editions of the Siemens Advanta podcast, we spoke about the power of the ecosystem. But right now, we've got a very urgent need to shift from closed to open innovation. So talk to us a bit about how ecosystems can support open innovation.
There's a fundamental shift, the recognition that innovation is happening inside, but also outside of the company. And outside really means it can happen in academia, it can happen in startups, in smaller to medium-sized enterprises, in large corporates. If there's open innovation, then who owns the IP? And there's all this discussion around IP. It's very interesting though, because very often protecting your IP and the benefits of that actually stand in the way for speed. And very often we have the discussion, why can't we create that idea until you really finally have protected it by any kind of patent, which takes you 3 to 5 years. Very often either the idea is falsified or that idea has been already implemented and the winner takes it all, because it's so much about speed and, of course, adoption of that very technology.
And that's very interesting, because speed over protection, it is clearly a question in this open ecosystem, how that works. Coming from business results, we know now that speed is actually more important. This is what makes business being successful. And so it's very interesting to see how do we adapt innovation so that we can deliver value for the business and value for society through that speed.
So we're really talking about a major shift here, a paradigm shift, an ideological one. And for such a shift in ideology to happen, certain resources and operational changes are required. So talk to us a bit about the kind of tangible resources that are necessary to fully transition to an open innovation ecosystem.
This is actually a big change, and we need to actually have very different things. First of all, you need to have digitally skilled employees. So this is really how the organization is handling and understanding the change. You need to have a common data collection system, because in order to have this ecosystem sharing transparently, you need to make sure that you can actually share the data collected. And you need to have an innovation strategy and framework that are common, because although it's very open and everybody bring their piece, there needs to be a common vision and there needs to be a common framework that help all these people to get together.
I only can second what Aymeric said, and what I would be adding is actually the technical ability. Whatever kind of service or product you are going to offer to the customer, it really is important that you approach it with an open mindset. That is, you architecture your software, your hardware in a way, as it is said earlier, with regards to APIs or SDKs for developers so that they can build on top of what you're doing. And in a way, it really shifts the question to not what you could do, but what you are best at. And that's precisely the conversation. You always have to focus on what you're best at, that you should be doing. For everything else, leave it to others.
I love that, by the way, because I think this is very difficult to get. Everybody thinks they can do everything. And sometimes you have to let go something that you could potentially do, but someone can do it better. And that, just as a mindset shift, is actually a very different way of looking at innovation.
I could not agree more. I'm a big fan of effectively delegating and also recognizing one's own limitations. And so this is a really exciting new ecosystem opportunity. So the present ecosystem has built-in boundaries and they might be too rigid for open innovation. What do we think are the possible challenges that we might encounter when trying to adopt this new ecosystem?
There's a lot of challenges, and that's very important to not take the challenges as an excuse. The availability of skills is actually not easy. We do a lot of projects at Advanta that actually develop enabling centers. So it's a place when you can have technology, you can have skill resources that are there for AI, for digitalization, that allow a lot of company to come and pull from. We talked about the IP topic. I mean, legal topic as a whole, IP and antitrust is actually pretty tough to execute, because we all talk about this nice competition, but we work together in the ecosystem. At the end, there's also law of antitrust. So you cannot do anything you want to do there. Yeah. And I think this is extremely important to acknowledge them, making sure we work on them, but this work further to continue, because working in this open environment and open ecosystem is a must to be successful.
That's perfect. And in particular, Siemens Advanta, under Aymeric's leadership, is exactly going in that direction. If you think about it, they are confronted with the client's challenge. And they then, in terms of not looking about what they could develop, but actually, has this been developed already? And so they look around of all the technologies we have available at Siemens already, putting that together, also from the outside, from other partners, and integrating that. And so thereby being more of an architect. So that's why solution architects is such an important role that we have also in Siemens Advanta. And the nice thing about this is about speed and efficiency. So Aymeric is right. there comes a lot of strings attached with regards to reliable of service and that trust and all of these things. So you need to build a new muscle in these areas. But in my view, there's no way around that.
Cooperation is so important, but also antitrust is very, very important indeed. And it's kind of like a difficult balancing act there. We do need to embrace this opportunity to bring the best of the best all together to make the best future. Now, Peter, I'm going to stay with yourself because as many listeners to the podcast will be aware, Siemens has always been very synonymous with technological advancements in the manufacturing and infrastructure sectors. So there's a huge amount of cross-sector information and innovation and knowledge and the core elements for the synthesis of a powerful digital ecosystem. So how can companies implement this for their sustainable development?
There's no way that you can do it alone because it's all about the supply chain. We talked about the carbon emissions, but you can also think about the circularity of things, so the kind of material that they're using. But it's also not just what you're sourcing, but then really the question about how you actually are recycling it. So do you know where your products are? How do you get them back? In which conditions? Do you have to remanufacture them, refurbish them, recycle them? It really, there's a lot of things that you need to consider in that sense. Again, you can't possibly do this yourself. You always have to work with your customers. Very often you have distributors, which you then also have to include in the conversation. There might be new participants in these kind of open innovation ecosystems where there's new capabilities coming on board, right? As you can tell, there's no sustainability without an open and flourishing ecosystem.
So in a world that's disrupted by the adverse effects of climate change, businesses really do need to be making a green transition. Ideally yesterday, but the second best time is immediately right now. So in this case, how do we think that open innovation ecosystems can help in reducing stress on resources and material waste generated by the manufacturing industry?
First of all, I think it's very clear for everybody now that that topic cannot be solved with a single player. This is absolutely obvious that everybody has to play a role in there. Now we see more and more actually the technology being a full enabler of sustainability. So sustainability and digitalization really converging with each other. Yeah, we have tool technology that allow not only to monitor but also to shift the carbon footprint of company. And so I think this is where it is extremely important to bring together the player and to actually do something.
I was thinking about this. The question, of course, is that how can we combine prosperity, because there's so many people still living in poverty around the world, and really combine that with sustainability, right? These are the 2 points that we have to connect. And we really believe that the digitalization is a major part in it. Many would argue that, well, actually digitalization is adding to additional carbon emissions, which is true. 4% of our total greenhouse gas emissions are being emitted by information and communication technology. But there's other studies that will show you that actually 40% of greenhouse gases can be reduced by the use of digital. We believe that instead of wasting physical resources, you go into the digital area, you optimize it there, and before you bring it into the real world. And that is precisely what we do.
And this digital twin idea, by the way, Siemens does a lot of work with building and campuses and everything. When you're there on a campus or in a neighborhood, I mean, you have so many players that actually live and breathe in that neighborhood that you need to bring an ecosystem to solve the net zero goals of that community. And this is extremely important to have some technology that actually can link all these players together and be able to understand where other people are, how is the building using electricity, and how you can optimize this entire ecosystem through technology. And this is where the combining the real world and the digital world is extremely important and has actual impact on society and on the neighborhoods.
Yeah, indeed. And I had the great privilege of visiting one of the Siemens smart buildings in Abu Dhabi many years ago to see an example of this incredible engineering actually coming to life. It was a great example of that magnificent marriage of design and data technology and real world experience.
And you know what is interesting? Just by understanding how people are moving and where they are, you can actually, the government, the city, the neighborhood can send transportation to the place where people are. You can plan to have transport stations that are greener. And by optimizing how the city lives, then you definitely can get to net zero targets.
Aymeric, you mentioned a very important point there, which is about the people who actually live in the solutions, the end users of this incredible technology. But one of the blind spots of many companies can be they forget to listen to the voice of the customer. But in the modern age, we need to have user-centric design. So how can companies integrate user-led innovations to further decentralize open innovation ecosystems?
I think now more and more with not only the technology, but also the techniques of innovation, you can actually implement feedback from the beginning as you co-create product, as you co-create solution. I think this is how digital enterprise at Siemens is actually working. This is exactly the concept. How do you make sure that you can design the product, design the productions, go in the utilization, and then come back in order to have the loop that is closed and to have something that is getting better and better every iteration.
I totally agree with Aymeric, because one of the key things we really are driving is data-driven user experience design, right? And that means that because of all the digital solutions Aymeric just mentioned, we see how people are really using it, and we can run A/B testings. If you have a good DevOps pipeline where you can bring out features in a very short period of time, your innovation speed is so much faster than in the past, right? So you really can focus on not just one user, but on the many users that you have and get their feedback every day into your product.
And having data at the user, by the way, this has really two use that is very important. Number one, if there's a problem, you can fix it. Yeah. And so we were talking with a medtech company where we put edge technology and AI at the edge to understand how the machine is performing at the patient. And so not only when there's a problem, you can right away find out and send someone to fix it. When this problem is happening a lot, the same data is actually used to be re-injected in R&D to build better machine. And so suddenly you have actually a same set of data that you use in completely different way to make the life of the patient better, but also to develop the new technology so that the reliability of the product will be much higher.
Phenomenal. I love it. It's a virtuous circle if ever there was one. Now, I'm a firm believer in that phrase that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So other than technical advancements, what kind of cultural and mindset orientated changes do we all need to focus on to have a strong, collaborative, open innovation ecosystem?
It is a big mindset change, let's be honest. I mean, you can describe it strategically, you can understand what technology is needed in order to have a working ecosystem. At the end, even driving technology are people. Driving an ecosystem are people. And so the shift of mindset from thinking about my result versus thinking about the results of the whole is actually very difficult to do. I mean, just think about it. An ecosystem work, if you bring more value to the ecosystem than you get out. You need to bring a lot of value to the ecosystem to get more than you would have alone, but less than you bring to the other players. Yeah. Just this is something that actually is to internalize, understand, and make business sense of it is not at all easy. So there's a lot of understanding, a lot of mindset changing, a lot of culture that need to shift. And those that will shift faster will be actually more successful, even business-wise.
Well said. Well said. Okay. And we've actually reached the last question, believe it or not. So in every single episode of the Siemens Advanta podcast, we like to give our C-suite listeners some actionable insights and key takeaways. So what advice would both of you like to give to our new and old listeners alike who might be hesitant to make this technological and ideological shift?
So I think this is very important already to say. The work in open ecosystem is happening. Yeah. Number two, it's all about people and mindset. And so this shift of understanding what that means for people is key because this will allow for implementation. And number three, I would say, is to start project by project to actually develop successes. And then there's going to be like a snowball going on.
And let me add number 4 and 5, because then we have a beautiful list. Number 4 is a focus again on where you might not be the best at. So identify an area that you have to partner with because you don't have it today in-house, and avoid the natural reflex to say, I need to own it. let go of that. Think about where you can partner. And then lastly is identify the people that really want to do it, because then you can celebrate them in public and they will have this halo effect to all the others that then want to join.
Well said. The 5 rules for life right there. That's absolutely fantastic. So there you have it. Life moves fast, but innovation moves faster. We need to adopt open innovation ecosystems to protect business, protect the planet, and create an optimistic future that we can all look forward to. Thank you so much to these 2 legends of Siemens for another highly stimulating discussion. Muchísimas gracias, Siemens Advanta CEO, Aymeric Sarrazin.
Thank you, Hassan. Always nice to talk to you.
And thank you so much to Siemens Chief Technology and Strategy Officer, Peter Körte.
Well, thank you both. This was big fun.
Listeners, thanks so much for joining us for this fascinating discussion. If you enjoyed the podcast, please don't forget to tell your friends, share with your colleagues, and leave a nice review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favourite podcasts. Speaking of which, if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe to the Siemens Advanta podcast wherever you get your very favourite podcasts. See you next time.